All right, guys, I made a comment to you before, and it does shine my own wheels up, but I'm actually not looking to do that. Like, I'm not looking for a brag. By example, if my statement is true, I don't win a trophy, or if my statement is true, I don't get a incentive in my paycheck. Nothing like that. It's just a reality that you guys and this group that we have formed is the single largest base and single loudest voice in MMA. Now, when I bring that up, Dana White had made a comment this morning. Maybe this will tie it together. Dana White made a comment this morning that UFC 280, which is going down Saturday, is trending off the charts. That's a quote. So Dana will have a plethora of numbers he can look at. From social media engagements to headlines that are out there, to comments and likes of the headlines. You've also then got a great indicator for people that order early. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, why would anybody buy a fight early? I hear you on that. And that probably represents an extremely small percentage of the buys unless you're a commercial outlet. One thing you guys might not understand, allow me to condescend, but for commercial outlets like a bar, Buffalo Wild Wings is going to do it. I've ordered this down at the Roseland Theater a number of times. When you do it that way, you will order it early. You will get the feed, and there's a process. You have to submit. When I ordered this to put downstairs at the Rumble at the Roseland, I had to submit the fire marshal code for capacity. Not somebody asks me, how many people can this fit? What will the fire marshal allow you to put in there before he says stop? Nobody else enters. So you will turn in that fire certificate. They will take that number. They will work out an equation. They will tell you what they're going to charge you. For example, if you had a commercial location and you were going to throw an event, you might have to pay $5,000. I might have to pay $1,200 or vice versa. I'm just sharing with you how this works. So when you have these commercial outlets, that is a massive indicator to the UFC. How many buys ahead of time? I'm just sharing with you a little bit of the data and the analytics that go into this. It can get quite sophisticated and would probably impress you. And that example I just gave you probably did impress you to some degree. Or you could come to Chael Sonnen's YouTube page. You could have no other info at all. You could just come to my YouTube page. I will put in the thumbnail, which the headline that you read prior to you click, and that will be a way of knowing, is the industry excited about a fight? Are they cold on a fight? Are they in between? 100% of the time. Now, I have surprised myself with some of the topics that I have put out, laid out for you guys. I've attached sponsors, ads, promised on a commercial basis a certain amount of views, and sometimes it backfires. And the big backfire as of late for me has been Jon Jones. Jon Jones might be the greatest talent the sport has ever seen. On my GOAT list, I have St. Pierre as a clear number one. But regardless of my personal feelings towards Jon, I got him at number 2. On a bad day, I don't have him lower than 3, and I haven't in a decade. I think that I'm fair. I think that I'm fair in assessing these skills. Let me tell you guys a quick talk that I had. One of my very early days at ESPN, and this goes back to 2011. I'm sitting at a restaurant. We got a pizza ordered. I'm visiting with Kieran Portley, who was the vice president at ESPN, but he was head of MMA at that time. Kieran Portley made an example about Jon Jones. And this is prior to Jon even being champion, I think. Be right in that same ballpark. Kieran said, one problem that we have with athletes, and he's speaking about from the numbers, from a viewership standpoint, as a guy who worked in the worldwide leader, right? So this is an important conversation. It's important that I listen, and you guys will see why I retain this. But he said, greatness is a problem unless it's a very high level of greatness. And he said, what we believe we have with Jon Jones is we have somebody the audience is going to tune in just because of their sheer greatness. And he made a comparison. He was talking to me about basketball. I remember Larry Bird's name came up. Magic Johnson's name came up. Right, this is a decade ago. And he was saying as good as those guys were, people did not tune in to watch them unless they had a rival, unless there was an opponent, unless there was a story. But that Michael Jordan, no matter what the Bulls were ranked, people would tune in and follow and fill up arenas and click on headlines just to see him. Now, we know that this is true. That's for all of sport. Might be a simple lesson, maybe one that you expected, but I remember it. In all of boxing, they say there's only two fighters that could ever draw on their own, Oscar De La Hoya and Mike Tyson, that everybody else had to have the right story and the right opponent. I think that list should be amended, and I think that Floyd Mayweather should be added to it, and I also think that Conor McGregor should be added to it, but I'll repeat the list as the way the boxing aficionados have it right now. Okay. He's got this special thing in Jon Jones. And everybody's going to get behind him and everybody's going to focus on it because he and he alone, even by himself, for the first time ever, could bring in attention. That was in roughly 2011. Could have been more like 2010. But here we are today, and here I am making pieces about Jon Jones, and you guys aren't finding them very interesting. Now, I know just by how many of you click, I'm not only audited on YouTube, it is a public audit. If I'm over here and I'm bombing, I don't have the ability to say otherwise. You guys can get the exact and precise number. So, why is it that it's a miss? What is it? Now, Jon Jones has been gone for 3 years. 3 years in MMA is an eternity. I mean, there are fighters that I would consider superstars, and I will go somewhere in public in their presence, and people will ask them to hold the camera while they take a picture of me. I've had the same thing happen to me, where I was removed from the sport. All of a sudden, I'm walking with Henry Cejudo. It's a true story in a hotel lobby. They stopped me. It's just hey, could you take a picture of me and Henry? So it's a real reality of how quickly things move. Is that what's working against Jon? Because if you say yes, I'm going to have to remind you of the most powerful economic principle in the world, which is supply and demand. Demand for Jon is very high right now because the supply is very low. And what is it about opponents? That'd be the final thing that I think that I would have to look at. Jon versus Francis all day long. Absolutely, positively, you can make that fight. Great job. You can go take the rest of the day off. But isn't that also true with Jon and Stipe? Jon and Stipe is a very fascinating match. Now, Jon spent 3 years. He did nothing with the creative element. He did nothing to build storylines. He thought it would just be there waiting for him. Now, that's a waste of 3 years, but he's got a couple of opponents. I just mentioned them. Francis works. Stipe works. I will tell you the hardest match for Jon stylistically is Curtis Blaydes, who nobody's calling for, which includes Jon and includes Curtis Blaydes. So there are some matches out there. There's been plenty of time to build them. But that hasn't happened. Jon did a pretty good job over the last few years of entertaining at least me with his physiological changes. I was into the weight gain. I was into the high goal of 240 plus pounds, how he was going to get there. I thought that that was interesting and compelling. Now, that wasn't 3 years worth of entertainment, but it got me a little bit of the step. Stipe has done the same thing. Stipe, who decided he was too small in his last contest, which was the rematch against Francis, of which 7.5 minutes, Stipe weighed in at 233 pounds. He learned from Francis and Francis' size and stature that he needed to gain some more muscle. So he put 20 pounds on. I think that's interesting. I find that compelling. But aside from me telling you this, you haven't heard that anywhere. You haven't heard Stipe's coaches or trainers. You haven't heard Stipe himself. Nobody's speaking about that. I personally think that you would be interested in that. But every time I do a Jon Jones piece, I flop. It's not the words coming out of my mouth aren't eloquent or interesting. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know until you've already clicked on the piece. Maybe it was wonderful. Maybe I gave you the cure for cancer. Maybe I told you the winning lotto numbers. You wouldn't know until you click. I'm having a hard time getting people to click. Why is that? And I do see the problem with Jon Jones. If I was a promoter and I could have Jon or I could have Tiavasa, now I have to honor the contract that they both have. I know all of you put in that position would raise your hand and say, I would like to have Jon. But the problem you're seeing with Jon is we've got two matches for him. We got Francis and we got Stipe. And before you think we can snap our fingers and create a third and a fourth and a fifth fight, we've had 3 years. 3 years, and he himself did not create a third, a fourth, or a fifth fight. Now, if I had Tuivasa, I've got a lot less of a layout. I don't even have to main event him. I don't have to bring him in on the pay-per-view. I mean, it's very different, and I have 8 different guys. 8 different guys at random that I could put him with and get the crowd's attention. There's a difference there. Now, I want to test my theory. I'm stating my theory for you now. I'm going to title this piece, Jon Jones Fans, Click Here. But in a moment, I'm going to do the same thing with a different piece on Tai Tuivasa.